the break, let's 10 minutes late. Let's go right in, okay? Let's do the Bechot Torah. Good morning to friends in over there. Ready? Let's do it. Let's do the. All right, Carol, can you please put up the Bechot Torah? We have a lot to do. Let's go. Big Shabbos. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekirshanu v'nitzotza v'tzivanu lasot b'divrei Torah. Okay, now let's make the Torah sweet. Let's open up on the screen and in the room. We're in Parashat Shmot. As I said last night in my sermon, that we're going to be talking about Batya this morning and the amazing story of Batya. So, anyway, it'll speak for itself. So let's open up to source number 1 on the page. Whenever you're there, we'll be with you. But I'm gonna go. So, Vatered bas Paro lechotz ala Yaor. This is chapter 2, verse 5. And the daughter of Pharaoh went down to wash by the Nile, by the Yaor. Now, just to set up the first chapter. The first chapter. Is the setup for Moshe Rabbeinu, for the birth of Moshe. And it begins, right, the first chapter of Shmos begins with the names of all the Shvatim, all of the tribes that come down, and then moves quickly into a verse that is the pivot point. It's not here in the text. It's Vayakar Melech Hadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yadat Yosef. And I talked about this last night. It's eerily, it's eerie on inauguration weekend that a new king arose that did not know Joseph. But that's always the pivot point in the story of the Exodus, that this not knowing, the unknowing of Joseph, it seems to be a very important piece. He didn't know Joseph, he never met Joseph, he didn't remember Joseph, he didn't remember Joseph's kindness, he didn't remember the role of Jews. We could go on and on. Was he a real new king? Was he not a real, was it a king who did know Joseph but decided to intentionally forget Joseph and the marginalized Jews? There's a lot of different ways to read this, but what ensues, of course, is the proliferation of the Jews or the Israelites. The Israelites become extremely prolific. They like Vayishritzu, they become almost like an infestation, right? The land of Egypt becomes infested with the Israelites, and that's the word, Vayishritzu. They become almost like insects, sherets. They become Vayishritzu, right? Even one midrash says that there were like 6 babies in a pop, it was like some kind of like animalistic, a litter of Jews. And apparently this population growth is a problem for Egypt and for Pharaoh. He claims that they're going to become a 5th column, and so he engages in 3 different, projects, each one in successively more intense. More clear, more transparent in his intentions. The first one tries to increase the labor for the Jews. That doesn't work. The Israelites begin to, they continue to proliferate. Then he decides that he's going to speak directly to the Midwife Association. The 2 heads of it are Shifra and Pua, and said that when they have male children, you should kill them quietly. Nobody hears. That doesn't work, right? Because the Shifra and Pua, as we spoke about last night, they acted against Pharaoh and contrabanded his decree. And finally, Pharaoh goes whole hog. He becomes transparently genocidal and decides to get the whole population involved. And so by the end of chapter 1, the entire population of Egypt is involved in throwing babies into the Nile, which then, of course, it does work. Because at that point, at the end of chapter 1, it seems likely that the Torah does not repeat the phrase, and they continue to proliferate. So it seems like that was a deterrent that really finally worked. Like, why would I have a child if my next door neighbor might find out and throw him and drown him in the Nile? So by the end of chapter 1, without its commentaries and without all of the details, which I think doesn't really land on most readers, like the entire population of Egypt is involved in an active infanticide project initiated by Pharaoh. The text doesn't say that quite that way, but that's the way the text wants us to feel it, because it doesn't repeat that the Israelites continued to proliferate in contrast to the previous 2 stages. So in that context, the beginning of chapter 2 is remarkable it's another moment of I think of great risk and great reward. The text tells us that someone from the house of Levi went and found a woman from the house of Levi, and they had a child. And we're supposed to feel like that's a big moment because it's very risky for them. And nonetheless, they take a risk. And after the child is born, as we know, and after 3 months, the mother realized she can't continue to hide him. It's too obvious. And so she puts him into a little teva, into a little basket, a little tevat goma, which is like a straw basket, some kind of, and then she lines it, she insulates it on the inside and the outside with bazefet, with tar, making sure that it's water resistant, and then she places the baby into the Nile. And it's a very powerful moment. So, his sister is running alongside, making sure that he's okay. She wanted to know what would happen to him. And it's in that context now that verse 5 emerges. Now, why is this in the text? Like, why did it have to happen this way? It's like an amazing thing. Like, I think as an Orthodox kid growing up, you never ask yourself why it had to happen this way. You think the Torah is just telling you the way it happened. But like, if you think about it, like intentionally, why is this the narrative hook and the place that it goes? Like, it's amazing to think like all of a sudden Bat Paro is involved. How did the daughter, like, if you're reading this story and you think she puts him into the Nile and the daughter of Pharaoh is coming down, you're thinking the jig is up. It's like, as a reader, you're thinking, that's not good. The daughter of Pharaoh is going to find, Moshe, this little baby in the ark, and of course, it's such a great literary device, and we'll explore what the rabbis do with it because they're equally shocked by it. So Vatered Bas Paro in verse 4 again. Let's go back. And so now Bat Paro goes down. She's not named, which is also interesting. Lirchotz ala Yaor, to wash by the Nile, and she had Na'aroseh Holchos al Yada Yaor, and she had her girls who were walking also with her on the side of Al Yad, is on the hand of the Nile, on the side of it. Vateres ateva, and she sees the teva, the little ark, the little basket. B'toch asuf, it's in the suf, in the reeds. It's stuck? I guess it must be stuck. Vatishlach es amasa vatikacheh, and she sends forth her amma, which is a maidservant or the word amata also, you'll see in a minute, is playfully can be read as she sent forth an amma as a cubit from the end of your finger to your elbow is called an amma. It's like a part of your arm. It's like a distance. So you'll see in a minute the Midrash will play with that she sent forth her arm. What does that mean? But anyway, she sent out her maidservant and to get the basket. Vatiftach vatir'eu, and she opens it in verse 6, and vatir'ehu es hayeled, and she sees the child. And behold, v'hinei na'ar bocheh, it is a crying child, a crying lad. Vatachmol alav, she has compassion on him, and she says out loud, Miyaldei ivrim zeh, this must be a Hebrew child. What else would it have been? Like, it's just amazing. I said this last night. Like, why did she say that? She outs herself. She could have said, oh, Miyaldei mitzrim zeh. Okay. The text wants us to know that she named the child as a Hebrew child, and that was not necessary, but it makes it even more remarkable. Vatomer achoso al Bas Paro, and then his sister gets involved. Doesn't name who his sister is, but okay, his sister to the daughter of Pharaoh. All these anonymous people speaking to each other. Ha'elech v'karasi lach isha menekes min Hebreos. Should I go and get a nursing woman from the Hebrews, that will nurse the child. And now Bas Paro says, go. Like, this going business in the Bible is also big news. Like, go, lech lecha, go. Rivka says, ha'elech. There's a lot of going that involves taking great risks and being courageous. And here, this very powerful woman, in an instant, makes a decision that, in Bible in its laconic terseness, doesn't even, underscore, like she it doesn't say like, she says like, give me 10 minutes, let me go think, let me go call my advisors, let me go see if this is a smart move, my dad, Pharaoh, it's a big deal. And also like Miriam getting involved here is also amazing, that Miriam inserts herself at the right moment to speak to Pharaoh, and that the text wants us to know that Miriam is a part of this redemptive story. Were it not for Miriam, would she come up with this on her own? I don't know, but the text maybe doesn't think so, or the text doesn't let us think that, and Miriam just inserts herself and very shrewdly says, let me go find, I just might happen to know somebody who knows how to nurse this 3-month-old baby. So Vatomer, Vatikras Ema Yaled, and she goes and gets the mother of the child. Verse 9, Vatomer Labas Paro, Helichis Ayaled Azev Hiniki V'Hinikiu. This apparently is between the daughter of Pharaoh and the mother, right, meaning Yocheved. She says to her, take this child and nurse this child, v'ani eten et scharech, and I will pay you. That's amazing. I'm the daughter of Pharaoh, and you're all slaves, and I'm going to pay you for this. That's amazing, right? She could have just said, take this child and breastfeed this child for me, and that's what I want you to do, and that's that. But no, she says, I'll pay you. And so the woman takes the child and she nurses him. And then when he grew to be, grew up, whatever that means. And she brings him to Bat Paro, and he becomes her son, which is painful also. But also maybe Yocheved, the mother's thinking this is like, Holocaust imagery, right? Like, at least he'll be safe here.
Like Schindler.
Like Schindler. On the other hand, also it's like remarkable. It's just remarkable every time we read it. She becomes his son. Vatikra Shemo Moshe. She called him Moshe. Clearly, like Ramses, like there's a Moshe it's an Egyptian name. Vatomer, but she says Kimin Amai Mishisiu. Moshe from the word Mishitiu. I pulled him from the water. That's his name. So in other words, he's walking around in the house of Pharaoh with the name I was pulled from water. Which is also like, so everybody must know that he's a Hebrew, right? Do they? It's weird. He's like in full sight. She's like rebelling against her dad in full view. She doesn't get in trouble.
We don't know. What's the argument?
Right. Are there arguments? It's true. We don't hear, but the text doesn't want us to know what happened. That's for sure. The text doesn't say anything about what happened about Paro later. She's never mentioned again in the Torah in quite this way. But she has. You'll see in a second. She's named in Jewish history. So she wasn't killed by Pharaoh. It seems she has other children, actual children, and.
Maybe Pharaoh isn't involved.
Maybe Pharaoh's not involved?
It says, I myself.
Right.
It's transgressive. This is a statement that she's making on her own.
Where does she say, I myself? I will give you the wages?
Yes. The translation is I myself.
Uh-huh.
So this is my
project. This is
an independent project.
It's my independent project. It would be kind of hard, though, for her to have a child without Pharaoh knowing about it. Presumably, again, I don't know how they live. Maybe they didn't live in the same palace, the same, city.
Adoption is, in many cases, it's an economic relationship. It's not necessarily that when we think of adoption today, it's a mechanism by which one takes a child and makes them their own. But adoption isn't necessarily like this everywhere. It's something which is a more formalistic relationship where there's not necessarily the same equivalent emotional reaction. That's
entirely plausible, and certainly the introduction of money here is very odd. This is interesting. It wasn't, it's not money towards the nursing mother, right? But
This,
this could be an economic.
to say that it's a limited adoption is not to say that it's still not a heroic act, to be clear.
No, absolutely.
It's, but it's one where, what's, I think, even more special in some ways than the saving of the child is the fact that, the mother is brought in. That, there's kind of this tendency to think of Miriam and, Moshe's mother pulling a trick on Pharaoh's daughter.
Right.
But she's very much a participant in this.
What she doesn't know, what she doesn't know at this point is whether or not, I mean, it's not clear that she knows that Yocheved or whomever this is, not this unnamed person, is the mother.
Yeah.
Could be just, again, a wet nurse or some version of a kind of a nursing, like.
Yeah. But it seems plausible to me that she knows that there's some relationship between Miriam and this kid, where it's like, oh, I just found this kid.
Could be.
Somebody pulls up and it's like,
Could be.
oh, wow, I can
Right.
set this up.
It could very well be, but like the text here in its, first of all, its refusal to name anyone thus far in a book called Names is remarkable. The first naming that happens in this section of names is by the daughter of Pharaoh who names Moshe. And the fact that Moshe will be called for the rest of his life by the name given to him by the Egyptian, right, princess who saves him and becomes adopted mother is also not lost on the rabbis. Let's look a little bit at the history. I know that their hands up, Caroline. You don't have to tell me. Okay, so I just preemptively, we're going to move forward, Amy, and we're going to move a little bit forward into the text, and then we'll come back. So look at source number 2. V'ishto ha'Yehudiya yaldat Yered. This is from the book of Chronicles. Divrei Yamim. Avi Gador et Chever Avi Socho. Ve'dikutiel Avi Zanoach. Ve'ele b'nei Bitya bat Paro. Asher lakach Mered. Mered marries a woman named Batya. This is in in the later books of the Bible. One of them is called Chronicles or Divrei Yamim, which is like a historical, right, telling of genealogies and so on. And apparently, much later on in the Torah, like there is a lineage of the daughter of Pharaoh, right? And these were the sons of Bitya, daughter of Pharaoh. There's like, she's mentioned in Divrei Yamim. Like the daughter of Pharaoh is mentioned, not just because she was Moshe's mom, adopted mom, but she had her own like lineage, right? So it's clearly, not only is she mentioned, but guess what? Look at this. In the rabbis, and by the way, it's much later on. Again, it's like, the fact that she's mentioned historically is also that she also lived longer, right? And that's underscored by the rabbi's own folk contribution to the myth and to the heroic status of Batya.
Rabbi, I have a question, which is, was Moses adopted before she had the other children?
That's absolutely great question. Not clear.
Okay.
Right? Because why did she need to adopt Moshe if she had, often adoption happens when you can't have a child? Is she adopting Moshe because, is her Rachmanis or compassion for Moshe is because she sees in him, like, listen, how else am I going to get a kid, right? And I need a kid. Or is it that, like, the text seems to indicate that her compassion for the child was aroused by the child, right? And so I would tend to believe that she didn't take Moshe because she needs another kid.
Yeah.
And she likely had other kids, which actually makes it even more complicated because now he has brothers and sisters. And
my question is more related to, like, later, the firstborn of every Egyptian is going to be slain.
Right, so that means Moshe's brother, presumably.
Moshe's brother would presumably be slain, but if if Moshe's the first, then, it would be like a little loophole where it's like.
Yeah, well, he's adopted, right, so he probably wouldn't, right. If he's the first, then she's spared, because he obviously didn't include himself in that plague. He wouldn't have been a firstborn Egyptian. Okay, so look at source number 3. Because not only is Batya mentioned in Divrei Yamim, but the rabbis, right? The rabbis see. One second. No, let's go to source number 5, just to give you a sense of her longevity, right? Look at source number 5 and then source number 6. They're basically the same source. There were 9 who entered the Garden of Eden alive. Hanoch, right? Enoch, the son of Yered, Hanoch ben Yered, Eliyahu, right? Elijah, the prophet, the Messiah, Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, Hiram. By the way, this is not an exhaustive list, meaning there are other lists, alternate lists. But anyway, Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, Hiram, the king of Tyre, Ebed, Melech, the Cushite, right? Not all Jews. Yabez, the son of Judah, the prince, and Batya or Bitya, the daughter of Pharaoh, Serach, Bat Asher, which I think is the most famous one of the most besides Elijah, and Yeshomim Afra Yeshua ben Levi, even Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So if you look at source 6 again, Batya did not die, but was among those who entered the Garden of Eden while still alive. And then the list is given again. So not only is she mentioned in Devar Yamin, but like according to other later sources, she has a status of an avatar. Like she is like born and never dies. Wow. She gets included. And not only that, if you look back at source number 3, that names her as the daughter of Pharaoh, but now she has a new name. It's not just, right, daughter of Pharaoh, because she's not called, right, Batya or Bitya in the Torah. She's named that in Divrei Yamin. So the rabbis in later want to know, where did she get that name from? Like, why is she called Batya, which I mentioned last night. This is an amazing teaching from Vayikra Rabbah and from Shmos Rabbah, right? It says, Ve'ele b'nei Bitya bat Paro. These are the children of Batya or Bitya, the daughter of Pharaoh. Rabbi Yeshua de Sichnin, Rabbi Yeshua from Sichnin taught in the name of Rabbi Levi. HaKadosh Amar la HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God said to her, LeBitya bat Paro, Moshe lo haya benech, Moses was not your child, ukirato benech, and you called him your son. Where did she call him her son? Because in the text that we just read earlier, it said, and you will be for me leben, you will be for me a son. Af at lo at biti, you are not my daughter, God says, but I will call you my daughter. A little harsh that it says, you're not my daughter. I mean, okay. Ani koreh otach biti, shenemar ela bnei bitya, ele bnei bitya bat ya. She is the daughter of Ya. Now, is her name Bitya because it's another name and the rabbis came along and made it into like Bat? Bitya is, 2 words, Bat, Ya, the daughter of Ya. I don't know. But the rabbis want to see in this a remarkable relationship between God and the daughter of Pharaoh that is A, rewarded in her longevity in her life, and 2, that she has a unique status as being the daughter of Yah. The daughter of Yah. In other words, you adopted Moshe, I, God, am adopting you. And so are we, the Jewish people, adopting you because you are a heroine. Right? What you did is remarkable. And not only is that her reward. Here, look at this. Look at source number 4. And she called him Moshe. I mentioned this last night. This is an amazing teaching. Mikana talamed. From here, the rabbis say you can learn Secharan shel gomlei chasadim, the reward or the merit of those that perform acts of kindness. Alpha pisha harbe shemot ayulo leMoshe, even though there were many names that Moshe had. Lo nikba lo shem b'chol Torah. There was no other name that was set for him throughout the Torah. Ella k'Moshe kiratu Batya bat Paro. Other than the one that the daughter Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, called him. Even God did not call him in any other name other than the name that the daughter of Pharaoh called Moshe. How much did the rabbis love Batya? I mean, Wendy, it's amazing. Yeah, Wendy.
God changed Abraham's name, God changed Jacob's name, and here Moses has a name that's Egyptian. It's curious why God didn't change Moses' name.
I mean, first of all, God changed Abraham's name, which is weird. Also, he got right? A lot of reasons given for it, but it's also unique. He doesn't change Isaac's name.
But changed Jacob.
Jacob's name also is changed only right? It's not the name itself, it's given a different name. Avram's name is changed. He keeps his name, but his name somehow is lacking something that the text wants to pull out. Both he and Sarah have something lacking, and both of their names change, which is amazing. But they keep their names there. Jacob, a whole thing about the name of Jacob is that his name, like the naming is the whole part of the story, right? He lied about his name, and so he gets a new name based upon something that was happening in the moment, right? It wasn't like a name change it was directly related to a scene,
And it goes back and forth.
right? And it
Continuing,
goes back,
still
even though,
uses the same
right,
name. Yaakov's
right.
all over the place.
Moshe's name changes. The only other person whose name changes in the rest of the Torah is Joshua, and it's more like the Abraham model, right? Abraham model. Maybe Jethro, but Jethro's name doesn't change; just has multiple names. So sometimes it's called Reuel, sometimes it's called Jethro, right?
All right.
No, but Sarah, I'm saying from no other name after Sarah, Abraham, Jacob, and then Yehoshua.
But why would God keep a Egyptian name?
Hey, so
Yeah.
sorry. If you're speaking in the room,
Yeah, it's hard to
can you
hear,
speak in the
right?
mic
So,
or
so
reiterate?
yeah, yeah, I will. So Wendy's asking why would God keep Moshe's name Moshe, and I think that's exactly what's implied in the Midrash. The Midrash is bothered, potentially. This is a good way to think about how Midrash operates. Sometimes there's an implicit question that the Midrash is answering that isn't right explicit, and maybe the Midrash is asking this question, which is, she's the daughter of Pharaoh, names it Moshe, but like Moshe's got to have a Hebrew name, right? Like Aaron or like Yocheved or Miriam. Why does the Torah make it that the greatest of all of the prophets is going to have an Egyptian name? And the answer of the Midrash is because it's a schar, it's a reward for her being, right, to honor who gave him the name, right? So that's like maybe an implicit, right? Okay. We have a couple of people online who had their hands up, and let's go to them and then we'll come back to the sources, okay? And, okay. Amy, I hope you're going to give us something from in the class, in the class. Yeah?
Yeah. Yes. You spoke about the two women who showed up as midwives were Miriam and her mother, Jochebed. So it wasn't just happenstance. I don't think the security would allow just anybody to wander into the palace and talk to the princess. So they knew them because they've already referred to them by name in the beginning of this discussion. The astrologers told the Pharaoh that a savior of the Jewish people was going to be born. So he was killing not only the Jewish boys but the Egyptian boys also. This is in Midrash, and so the minute they thought that they put them in the Nile. I mean, there's 100 ways to kill a baby, but they put them in the Nile because they said Noah's flood. After the flood, God promised Noah that he would never flood the world again, and so they figured it was okay to put them in water to kill them. But the minute that Moses hit the water, the astrologers got a message from the system that there was no longer any need to kill the boys. Now, boys are an economic resource, so you want to cut this off as quickly as possible. So the astrologers said, it's okay, you don't have to kill any more boys. That is why Batya, who is believed to be a convert, Batya being a Hebrew name rather than an Egyptian name, was coming down to the water to do either a mikvah or wash off from leprosy or skin disease when she came down. And the question was, how did she know he was a Hebrew? Because he was circumcised.
Right. So thank you for filling in all of the Midrash behind it. It's really good because there's a lot of Midrash, a lot of questions that I asked rhetorically that the rabbis also asked and then gave various answers. Like, how did she know? She looked at him and she saw that he was a Jewish kid, and it should have said, like, how would she know that he's a Jewish kid? I mean, of course, the rabbis say that he was mahul, that he was circumcised, But it's also the case that she would know that he was a Jewish kid because he was in the Nile. Of course, that's the simple meaning of the text, but once you go the Midrashic route where all of the children are also out of fear because of the astrologers, then you're right, then you have to, once you're there and say like that all of the children were being potentially thrown to the Nile, then of course you have to have a distinctive marking that he was circumcised, which is also underscored by the fact that when she saw that he was good, that she saw him and he was Jewish. So what was it about seeing him that made him a Jewish child? So all that's there. Thank you, Amy, for filling in those pieces. Marilyn.
Yes. So I was once commissioned to do a song about Batya. And in my song, I realized that even the sound of Batya is like the sound of a baby crying. And it's like, Batya, Batya, Batya. And Moses is calling, Batya, you are the daughter of, you are God's daughter. Draw me out of the water. And it says to Batya, Lechilach, you will leave your birthplace, your father, your home, and go to a place that is yet unknown. And Batya, in one of the midrashes, of course, ends up leaving, leaving with the Jews, and that. So it's almost a parallel to Abraham, that she has this whole vision where she defies her father and leaves her father and leaves the home and goes off with him. Just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but I love that. First of all, I love that, any midrash that works with the sound the baby makes, or like that tries to have organic or organismic Torah connected to names. I love, and the building blocks of language and how things. I love that. I also love the introduction of this theme of someone who is like dancing with wolves, like someone who is, quote unquote, a boundary crosser to the other side, to the ones who have become other, the ones who are the marginalized, who comes from a place of privilege, but is not like her dad, and finds herself identifying deeply with the Israelites, and is in that way kind of a spy, or like she really is in a different camp. Like, of course, the Torah sets this whole thing up that the Egyptians are evil and the Israelites are good, and that there's no good reason for us to be right. There could never be any good reason for us to be persecuted. And Abatia seems to be somebody who is, or this daughter of Pharaoh seems to be somebody whose humanity the Torah wants us to feel. And you'll see the rabbis also in a moment when we get to source 10, they embellish and expand on her humanity. But like, as a literary device, just as a structure in the Torah, it's just shocking. And like no amount of midrashic material really fully, ever makes it less so to me. And I think the rabbis too were really hitting the head with this part of the story, with this intentional detour in the story, that it's a kind of a feature in the story, is that Moses must be brought up in the house of Pharaoh by the daughter of Pharaoh. Could there have been any other way for the story to move? Of course. I mean, the story could have been a lot of ways the story could have moved, but the fact that it seems like that the Torah wants us to know something about how freedom happens. Like Moshe could not have been a slave, it feels, from the text. Like if you're thinking to yourself, who would be the redeemer of the Jewish people? Moshe had to find a way out where he never tasted slavery. Like Moshe is not brought up as a slave. And as Sigmund Freud points out in his Moses and Monotheism, that is a unique feature of the Bible in contrast to other mythologies. Other mythologies, the prince becomes a pauper or is hidden in full view and has to be discovered to be truly the prince. Here, the discovery is the opposite. Moshe has to discover that he wasn't privileged, that he's part of the oppressed people, that he grew up in, the lie that he grew up in is that he was spared. And then he has to live and make a choice just like she does. She does this, right? She has to make a choice to give up her privilege now. She's throwing everything on the line. And Moshe will also do the same thing, right? In a different way. He has to say, Moshe presumably could have lived his whole life as the adopted prince. He was safe. But right, very shortly, he's going to have to make a decision. And the Torah is not even going to, it's not even going to be a decision. He's just going to do it, just like she does it, right? There's something remarkable in that as well. I wanted to read to you source number 10. Just because we'll run out of time, I know it, and I really want you to see this. Vayigdal HaYeled. So we'll come back. Richard, I see your hand. We'll come back in a second, okay? Vayigdal HaYeled. Yeah, you there? Esrim v'arba'ah chodesh henikathu. For 24 months, she nursed him. V'ata omer vayigdal HaYeled. What does that mean? He grew. It was only for 24 months. She nursed him, only 2 years. He wasn't, he was only 2 years old. And the Torah very quickly went to, and he was grown. Ela shaya gadel shelo keder kol haaretz. In other words, you can hear in the Midrash, they're struggling with the language. They had a previous tradition that his mother only nursed him for 2 years. So what does it mean in the text where it says that he grew up and then she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh? Seems to be, grown here seems to be not the right word, but it does work. But the rabbis have a certain understanding of grown, so they have to say that he grew unusually, like a growth spurt. But this is the part, look. But tivi'ehu lebat paro, and she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh. Haisa bas paro menashekes, that the daughter of Pharaoh would kiss, umechabekes, and hug, umechabeves, and she would adore him, ki'ilu hu bena, as if he were her actual biological son. She wouldn't let him leave the palace. Almost like Siddhartha a little bit, right? In the myth of the Buddha. He wasn't allowed outside of the palace of the king. Well, and because Moshe was beautiful, everybody wanted to come and see him. And anybody that would see him would not leave his presence. And even Pharaoh was kissing and hugging him, or you're right, right? Just that image of he's playing on Pharaoh's lap.
Grandfather.
It's like his grandfather. And he loved him. No tel Kisro. This is the whole legend of how Moshe loses his ability, like he becomes unable to speak. His speech impediment is born in this moment, right? That Moshe notel Kisro shel paro misimol rosho. He would take Pharaoh's crown and put it on his own head. Moshe, very, very Oedipal, right? Just as he would do it when he would grow up. That she was the only one, right? Forget about the whole Ezekiel thing, right? But the verses that I brought fire from within you, and that fire that was within you will consume you. In the same way, the Midrash here is using that verse to talk about how, in the story, someone from within Pharaoh's own house will rise up and punish her father, right? Even right, the anointed king, meaning in the future, let's skip over the messianic eschatological things here, right? Right. This is a very powerful image that the Midrash is trying to stoke. There's a fire from within, that it won't come from without, but it'll come from within. Now go down a little bit to V'hayasham Yoshvin Chartumim Mitzrayim. It says, and some of the observers were sitting among them, right? Were the magicians of Egypt. And they were saying, we are afraid of this one who is taking your crown and putting it on his own head. Right? שלא יהיה זה also שאנו אומרים שעתיד ליטול מלכוס ממך. מהם אומרים להרגו, מהם אומרים לצרפו. היה ישרו יושב ביניהם ואומר להם, הנער הזה אין בו דס, אלא בחנו עושו. So this is, they were like, this is an amazing mishmash, right? There's like a group of consultants that were sitting there going, you know what, he really is dangerous, and we should kill him, kill the kid. And some were saying we should kill him, some were saying we should burn him. And then Jethro, apparently, according to the rabbinic lore, was an advisor in Egypt. And he's sitting there and he says to them, you know what? He doesn't have any das. He's not, like, he's just a kid. He doesn't really know. And he has no intention to take the throne. Test him by bringing him a piece of gold and a coal. If he outstretches his hand towards the gold, surely he has intent to take the throne. And you should kill him. And if he outstretches his hand towards the coal, he surely does not have intent to take the throne, and he does not deserve to die, right? I'm just reading it in quickly, right? And so what happens? Immediately brought the gold before Moshe, and he outstretches his hand to take the gold, and Gabriel comes. So good idea, Jethro, but he outstretches his hand to take the gold, and Gabriel came and pushed his hand, and he grabs, the gold, and he grabs the coal. He then brought his hand along with the coal into his mouth and burned his tongue. And from this, we know that he was slow of speech and slow of tongue. Right? This is the source. The rest of it is the remainder of the previous midrash about why his name is Moshe. So this is an amazing midrash. Like, just off the charts. This midrash essentially says, well, you guys heard it. What do you make of this match? First of all, why is his hand not also burned? He should have had a hand problem also for the rest of his life. I always wondered that. But what's happening in this myth about Batya and about Moshe? Let's first talk about Batya and how she loved him. Right? Is there any doubt whatsoever that she loved him? Not only did she love him, but she loved him and she made Paro love him. She brought the image of the Midrash. The rabbis are playing with this image where the Redeemer is born into that place. What's that all about? What do you think? What do you think that's all about? Let's see if Richard has something to say. Richard. Richard Yaskin.
Sorry, I think he just went to go to the bathroom quickly or something.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So when Richard comes back, what do you think? What is this? What's going on here in this midrash? What are the rabbis? I mean, none of this is in the text in quite this way. What are the rabbis who are giving this sermon? They're giving this to their people. And now we've been reading this for a couple of, almost 2,000 years. What's the 1,700 years? Moshe the Redeemer was beloved by, he lived in the house of Pharaoh and was like a play object. And then there was, he's wounded. The wound that he carries with him is the wound of the danger that he posed to the systems of oppression. And that wound then becomes, he becomes the man who uses this wound, becomes the place that redeems the people, his speech. Okay. I think, Richard, you're back. Go ahead, Richard. We opened it up for you.
Thanks, Rabbi David. I'm shocked that the Zohar goes in a totally opposite direction regarding Batya from the Midrash, and I was wondering if any thought as to why they do that. They cite the verse that Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe at the Nile, and they say, the one coming from the side of the left of harsh judgment, as is said, to bathe at the Nile precisely, not at the sea. And Professor Danny Matt says in his footnote on that, a demonic force issuing from Din, harsh judgment, which is located on the left side, whereas the sea represents Shekhinah, the Nile represents impurity, sea galante. That's really unusual. They would go the opposite direction from the Midrash, which lauds Batya.
No. Yes, good point. But no. So it says in the Torah that in the Midrash, Batya opens up the basket, Vatir Ehu, and she sees him, and V'hinei nar bocheh, and he's a crying child. So the Midrash already earlier than the Zohar, the Midrash says, and the Zohar is working from the Midrash too, that when she sees him, it should have said Vatere Oso, that she saw him, but instead it's Vatir Ehu, and she saw. It's a very strange word. Vatir Ehu means, it literally means she saw him, but she could have said, and she saw V'hinei nar bocheh. And so the rabbis already there say that she saw the Shekhinah with Moshe. That in the basket with Moshe was the divine presence, the Shekhinah. That's already in the Gemara and the Midrash. Now, Batya, or the daughter of Pharaoh, like all other parts of the Torah, become allegorized and abstracted into principles in the Zohar. The Zohar is the most remarkable work of allegory that we have. It essentially takes the characters and the moments and the physical locations and other objects of the Torah and abstracts them into principles related to Kabbalistic terminology, Kabbalistic constructs. So the Yaor, which is the Nile, of course, is the source. It was a god of Egypt, and we already have in the Midrash that when she's going down to wash in the Nile, the rabbis already said that she's going to wash herself from the idol worship of her upbringing. So we have a sense that she's coming to purify herself. This is what leads Amy and others to quote the Midrash. It says that she was going down to the Nile to convert, and that the Nile would become a mikveh. But what kind of mikveh would the Nile be if A, it's a god, and B, it was a place where all the blood of the children is? And so and it also becomes a source. It converted to blood in the very first of the plagues. So, and Moshe is drawn from that place. So according to the Zohar, Batya represents the energies of din, or of judgment, that are going down, right? The demonic, as he calls it, the demonic, and so is the Nile. The Nile also is the demonic for all kinds of good reasons, right? And Moshe, who is going to be drawn from the Nile, is the teaching that in the Zohar, the teaching is always that light has to be drawn from the darkest place, and that there can be no light without darkness. Leis nahora without chashocha, there is no light without darkness, and that Moshe is the embodiment of light. When he was born, right, it says that when he was born, the mother saw that he was good, and the Midrash says that he was good the way the light of creation was good, right? Tov in chapter 1 of the book of Genesis, and Tov, good, is used for him and for light in the very beginning. And so he is a light being, and he's drawn from the dark side, from the demonic. And that's why he has the ability, right, to subdue the dark forces, Davka, because he was drawn from that place. And then his eventual living in the house of Pharaoh means that the Shekhinah is in exile with us, and that Moshe, as it were, is the principle, the ability to come from within the darkness and to bring redemption from the darkest place. So even though it seems like it's going, Batya is, right, could be all kinds of reasons why the Zohar is diminishing Batya's prominence, but I think the Zohar is trying to say also that she came from the demonic place too, herself, and her journey, right, from the darkest place to become the adopted mother of Moshe is itself the journey in the Zohar of extracting light from darkness, and that's the redemptive process. The redemptive process is always about the Messiah being born in the place of impurity so that they know how to work with impurity, right? Moshe had to know how to work with the demonic, and so he was born not in the demonic, but placed in there, and he knew its language, he knew its contours. So I think that's a little bit where the Zohar was going. All right, Thomas.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm sorry I couldn't join you in person. A very quick story about drawing light from darkness and about how sometimes history rhymes and there are coincidences to pay attention to. America's greatest architect, in my opinion, and I assert a fact, is Louis Kahn, the modern architect of the 20th century of Philadelphia. Maybe some people know him. There was a film. And he was known as the Master of Light. And he was a Jewish American Lithuanian immigrant. His father emigrated to Philadelphia to avoid the horrors of Lithuania at that time. And Khan was a beautiful man, physically beautiful man, but had a scarred face, an extraordinarily scarred face. And the legend is that back in Lithuania as an infant, he was left unattended. And he was so drawn to the coals of light, the glowing coals in the oven, I guess, that he basically crawled into the oven, and the coals scarred his face, and that he was drawn to the light in the darkness. And literally, he's called the Master of Light, and as an architect. And he wasn't raised Jewish because his father was like a gambler and a bounder and this kind of wastrel, famously. But his first mature commission, where he really became Louis Kahn, where he became an architect, was for a synagogue in Philadelphia. And basically, they were like, "You need to remember you're Jewish. You need to do this synagogue."
Wow.
And that's where he became Louis Kahn.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of other mystical stuff about this guy, and his personal life was complex and also shadowed. But I don't know. I feel like sometimes these coincidences matter, and I just wanted to share it.
I love that, and I love that. I want to add that, by the way, the word Yor, it's an interesting word because it means the Nile, but it's also from the word light. It's Yor with an aleph. So I want to bring a teaching that
Can I
connects
just quickly
Tomas.
add? Yeah, can I just quickly add that his daughter Sue Ann Khan is a very well-known flutist.
Yeah.
Oh, that was necessary. Okay,
That was
great.
necessary.
That's good. Thanks, Barbara. Okay, so thank you. And so I just wanted to piggyback on Tomas and Richard's and bring a teaching that I brought here from a Hasidic source. I wanted to do Hasidic sources from now on, but I wanted to talk about Bati last night. I wanted to talk about her again this morning. And this is not, I can hand it out to you. It's all in Hebrew, but I just wanted to bring it quickly so we can get also Jay in a little bit. I'll give it to you outside. We don't have to read it inside. It's just a remarkable teaching from the Rebbe from Chernovitz, the Mermaim Chaim, who writes something that I just, it's so connected to what Thomas was saying and Richard was saying. He said that Vatered, that she went down to the Nile, and the rabbi said in the Gemara, as we said earlier in the Talmud, that she went down to the river, as I go down to the river to pray. Oh, wow. It's the second one on this, by the way. The second teaching on the other side. Yeah, Carolyn, right there. It's that one. If anybody wants, they can hand that quickly. Just take. So that she went to the river to cleanse herself from her father's idol worship. And so he asked, why is it here? Omnam Noda, he says, but however, Noda, Kiparo, Mitzrayim, Abdullah, Yeor, it's known that Paro and the Egyptians all served, they worshipped the Nile. And it must be that she also served, at one point, she had served the Nile. She had worshipped the Nile. And when she wanted to fix that, this is just an amazing teaching. When she wanted to fix that particular sin of serving the Nile, his Minla, God gave her the opportunity, litakein ba'oso davar shekilkala. God gave her the ability to fix this. The thing that she had failed in would be the thing that she was saved by. Like the very place where she had been, which she had fallen in the very act itself, that act itself would become the thing that purified her. That the coal that burned her would also be the coal that warmed her. That the waters that defiled her would be the waters that purified her. And he then goes on to say that it's a general principle, that this is a general principle that tzaddikim, that the righteous ones, that badavar shechotim bo mitratzim, that they want to do they want to fix what they've broken in the very place, in the very manner, in the very object, or the very situation that they fell in. Like if it was with liquor, they want to fix it with liquor, right? If it was something else, they want to go back to the scene of the crime and the very thing itself and its opposite. And so it's something about the Yeor, about the Nile here, which is also operative because it became of course, water in the story of Exodus begins as a life-taking source. And of course, the last moment of the Exodus is when the very waters that drowned the Israelites becomes the waters that drowns their enemies. And so there's something in this around the spiritual principle of the thing and its opposite. And that Moshe has to be, in a way, the one who can hold these opposites together. Right? He has to have enough of Egypt in him, right? In order to be, right, the great Redeemer, he has to understand. He can't be so much from the outside. And that he has to, right, what? He has to be the one who knows how to cross over, right? And it's something about Bat Paro and the image of her going down to the water as the demonic, as Richard said, or as Louis Kahn, right, working with light. He also has to know darkness to know light. He can't be the master of light if he doesn't know darkness. And he has to use the very thing, like he was burned, right, with the coals on his face, and he becomes the master of light. Because that's instead of shying away from it, saying now light is dangerous, right? Moshe has to face, right? Anyway, so Jay, whose middle name Yair is also Yeor, go Jay.
Yes, I have potential. One day I will shine. Shabbat Shalom. I want to go back to text 10. I don't think we can ignore the fact that Moshe was irresistible. And in fact, Mishael Ehud, so we got back to see again, anybody who saw him could not leave his presence, and then it goes right to Pharaoh. And I'm wondering, to kind of make a leap and answer your original question, which is not just about maybe crossing over darkness, etc. He was perfect. And in fact, he was going to reach for the gold. And it took divine intervention to change the course of his hand to the point where he eventually became flawed. In other words, he went from being perfect and irresistible to someone who had difficulty speaking. And so maybe there's that lesson in most of our patriarchs and our great heroes. They all had flaws. And maybe to really be able to redeem and to lead, you have to be able to also be resilient enough to overcome your flaws.
Yeah, it's true. The wounded healer is such a powerful myth in all mythology, and certainly in this one. He needs to know that redemption has its time, and not to, were he to try to take the crown too soon, he was in danger. And so, so he needed to bide his time, and which meant he had to hold back. He had to become wounded in that place. And yeah, it's like all of these teachings are so profoundly, impactful. And I brought it to Shabbos because I'm thinking a lot about the next 2 days, and I'm thinking about the next 2 years, and I'm thinking about like the spiritual work that I'm feeling called to do, and that I feel a lot of people are called to do, which is, we have these images, as I said last night, of the calls to action, Shifra and Pua, and their conscientious objection and their resistance, and the small acts and larger acts that they engage in. But there's also a reminder in the text that not all heroes are quote unquote on our side in the world of sides. And that the most remarkable things can also happen in the most unlikely of places and from the most unlikely of people. And that people can surprise us. And right, there's something about the text that never gets old in terms of its shock. Right? Who would have thought that the daughter of Pharaoh would be the one who the Redeemer was being shaped by? And again, I think that the Torah is being very obvious with us about this. It's also not saying only one thing. It's saying hold multiple perspectives, as it often does. Right? Hold multiple avenues of behavior and hold multiple mindsets. I think that's like a pretty Torah-itic way to think about the way forward, especially on a weekend when a new king will be crowned, coronated, and who will definitely not know Joseph, right? And there's a lot ahead that will be in the mold of Shifra and Pua, no doubt about that. There's like a lot of Shifra and Puaing that's going to happen. But there's also, God willing, also the possibility of this other heroine and surprising us and not at first glance seeming like the one through whom redemption might spring. So we're going to go inside with Davin. We're quite late. So thank you to Carolyn. Thank you to all of you online and all of you in the room. Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos.